While being sentenced for her crimes in March of 2016, 17-year-old Roxanna Sikorski cried as she apologized to her parents, lamenting that she hadn't been the daughter they wanted. Sikorski, along with her boyfriend at the time, 23-year-old Michael Rivera, had allegedly plotted to kill her entire family. At around 2 a.m. on October the 17th of 2014, the team was inside her family's Detroit home, while Rivera sat in his car outside giving her instructions via text. The man sent her a diagram of the neck and gave instructions on how to cut it like a tomato. He also told her to make sure the victim stopped breathing. Sikorski sliced her brother's neck before attempting to stab her younger sister. When their parents heard the screams, they immediately intervened before the younger sister could be harmed. The victim was taken to the Mott Children's Hospital in Ann Arbor, where he underwent surgery. Sikorski fled the scene with Rivera, but they were arrested hours later at the latter's home on Detroit's southwest side. They were both charged with 4 counts of conspiracy to commit murder and 1 count of assault. Their bail was set at $1 million each. On July the 23rd of 2015, Rivera was convicted on all charges, including attempted murder and using a computer to commit a crime. The following month, he was sentenced to life in prison. In a separate case in September, he was handed a 30 to 180-month sentence after he was found guilty of having unlawful intercourse with Sikorski in July of 2014. Sikorski pleaded guilty to 1 count of assault with intent to murder in February of 2016. As part of the deal, the other charges against her were dropped. According to the Daily Mail, her mother pleaded with the judge to go easy on her daughter, who'd been receiving treatment for depression and ADHD. Nevertheless, Sikorski was sentenced to 10 to 20 years behind bars. Number 11. Ashford Thompson. Police officer Joshua Mkhitaryan was conducting a traffic stop at the intersection of Route 91 and Glenwood in Twinsburg, Ohio, when he was shot in the head 4 times. The incident unfolded at around 2 a.m. on July the 13th of 2008, when the 33-year-old officer stopped Ashford Thompson for allegedly driving under the influence. Upon being placed under arrest, 23-year-old Thompson, who had a permit to carry a concealed weapon, struggled with Mkhitaryan before pulling a gun and opening fire. The officer was pronounced dead at Metro Health Medical Center shortly before 3 a.m. Meanwhile, Thompson was arrested at a Cambridge Drive home where he used to reside. A week later, the young man was indicted on charges of aggravated murder, escape, and tampering with evidence in connection to Mkhitaryan's death. He initially pleaded guilty to aggravated murder, but later withdrew his plea. When Thompson appeared in court on January the 27th of 2010, he cried as he described his life behind bars. He told the judge about the harassment he had to deal with, including not receiving his mail and having his bed sheets taken away. While openly weeping, he claimed he couldn't get any kind of justice and said, "Just execute me. I'm tired of it." Thompson was later found guilty and sentenced to death in June of 2010. Number 10. Shelby Isaac. In January of 2016, a Tennessee couple and their unborn child were killed over $250 worth of hair weaves. 18-year-old Shelby Isaac met with 34-year-old Eddie Tate II in Memphis to discuss purchasing the hair weaves in question. After the transaction was complete, Isaac set up another meeting with Tate to get a refund, according to investigators. When Tate pulled up to the 2100 block of Westchester Circle on January the 22nd, Isaac reportedly opened fire on his car. Tate and his girlfriend, 35-year-old Edwina Thomas, who was nearly 8 weeks pregnant, sustained multiple gunshot wounds. Tate died at the scene while Thomas was rushed to Regional Medical Center in critical condition. She would later suffer the same fate as her boyfriend. Initially, prosecutors tried to charge Isaac with 3 counts of murder, but the case was dismissed due to a lack of evidence with no probable cause. The following day, prosecutors successfully obtained a grand jury indictment against Isaac. During the ensuing trial, the prosecution showed the jury fingerprint evidence that implicated the suspect in the crime. Witnesses testified that Isaac had blood on her clothes and a lot of cash on her person shortly after the couple were killed. Isaac was found guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder in the shooting deaths of Tate and Thomas. She was also convicted of reckless homicide and criminally negligent homicide of the unborn baby. As the judge polled the jurors, Isaac collapsed to the ground, where she remained for a few minutes before sobbing Mummy. She was sentenced to 30 years in Tennessee State Prison. Number 9. Dominique Slaughter. After stealing a credit card on August the 23rd of 2019, 26-year-old Dominique Whitney Slaughter from Detroit, Michigan was arrested. He later pleaded guilty to possessing a stolen credit card and carrying a concealed weapon. On May the 17th of 2021, Judge Kelly Ramsey sentenced him to 12 months behind bars, followed by 18 months of probation plus restitution payments and fines. Ramsey allowed Slaughter to remain free on probation with a GPS tether in order for him to work and pay off his restitution, as well as to resolve 6 outstanding warrants he had in other jurisdictions. 14 months after being sentenced, Slaughter was back in court for his scheduled surrender and to start serving his custodial sentence. His probation officer informed Ramsey that Slaughter violated home zone violations, hadn't paid any of his fees and restitution, hadn't resolved his pending warrants, and had an additional 4 warrants to his name. There were also several instances during which his GPS tether had been shut down. As Ramsey mentioned Slaughter's consequent prison time, the latter reportedly became distraught, raising his hands while holding his head. The judge demanded that he stand straight and face her. Slaughter then started to put his hands in front of his face as he wept and begged Ramsey to give him at least a few hours to get things in order for his family. The man continued to weep and beg, but the judge remained adamant that he needed to surrender that day. Ramsey told him, "Come on now, breaking the law has its consequences." Number 8. Jalil Marquise Smith Riley. On the night of November the 16th of 2013, police responded to the 5200 block of Carthage Avenue in Norwood, Ohio, after receiving reports that a Cincinnati couple had been shot in their car. At approximately 10:30 p.m., responding officers found 21-year-old Aaron Martin standing outside of the car with a gunshot wound to the head, speaking incoherently. They also found 20-year-old Proshia Brooks unresponsive with several gunshot wounds of her own. She was taken to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center, where she succumbed to her wounds 3 days later. Martin survived but reportedly suffered permanent brain damage. Surveillance footage revealed that 3 men approached the couple's vehicle moments before the shooting unfolded. Investigators believed that it was an armed robbery that turned violent. Nearly 2 years later, 3 suspects were identified. The shooter, 22-year-old Jalil Marquise Smith Riley, was arrested in Cincinnati. The other 2 male suspects had no ties to the area. One was already jailed in another state, while the other was deceased. On August 11th of 2016, Smith Riley avoided the death penalty by pleading guilty to aggravated murder and attempted murder. 2 months later, during his sentencing at Hamilton County Common Pleas Court, he started shedding tears. As he was about to address the court, he apologized and said that he still hoped to go home someday. After the judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, Smith Riley sat on the floor of the courtroom and continued to cry. Number 7. Dylan Shoemaker. After being convicted of the murder of his girlfriend's young son, New York teen Dylan Shoemaker wept and claimed he didn't mean to kill the boy. Shortly before 4:20 p.m. on March the 19th of 2013, the 16-year-old was babysitting his girlfriend's 2 children at a Springville Village home in Concord. The mother, 19-year-old Ashley Smith, was working a shift at a nearby Pizza Hut. When Smith arrived home at the end of the night, one of her sons was dead and Shoemaker was consequently arrested. Investigators determined that the teen had beaten the boy to the point of death. A forensic pathologist from the Erie County Medical Examiner's Office determined that the victim suffered blunt force and impact injuries to his head, neck, torso, and extremities. The injuries were consistent with having been repeatedly struck and pushed or slammed to the ground. Following the teen's conviction in January of the following year, State Supreme Court Justice M. William Bowler called him a manipulator and deceiver for his attempt to sway the jury with tears. Shoemaker had previously told his mother during a phone call that all he had to do was cry in front of the jury and that they'd feel sorry for him. Bowler ultimately sentenced him to 25 years to life in prison. Number 6. Antonio Barbo. Wisconsin teen Antonio Barbo was sentenced to life in prison after prosecutors successfully argued that he murdered his great-grandmother in her Sheboygan Falls home on September the 17th of 2012. Barbo, along with another teenager, Nathan Pape, broke into 78-year-old Barbara Olson's home to rob her. He reportedly attacked Olson with a hatchet, while Pape attacked her with a hammer. She was killed, and Barbo initially tried to put her body in the trunk of a car. When he was unable to, however, he put it in the garage and covered it up with a blanket before fleeing in his great-grandmother's vehicle. 2 days later, the body was found and the boys responsible were charged with intentional homicide, to which they pleaded not guilty. Barbo did so by reason of a mental disease or defect. According to Barbo's family, he had never been the same after suffering a brain injury in a serious car accident. During the resulting trial, Barbo said that he and his co-defendant each struck the victim 3 to 4 times during the attack. But according to a medical examiner, Olson suffered more than 18 blows to the head. Barbo eventually pleaded no contest and apologized for what he'd done, saying he regretted his actions. He broke down in tears during his sentencing on August 12th of 2013. The following day, his accomplice, who had also been found guilty, was sentenced to life in prison. Pape and Barbo will be eligible for parole when they turn 45 and 50, respectively. Number 5. Arnesia C Washington. Texas woman Arnesia C Washington was charged with murder after she struck a man with her car on a Houston freeway on May the 7th of 2016. According to a witness, 30-year-old Washington had been driving erratically, weaving back and forth across lanes before swerving into a concrete barrier. Subsequently, she accelerated into the back of a motorcycle, being ridden by Steve Rudolph. Washington allegedly continued driving after striking Rudolph and only stopped when other motorists intervened. In the aftermath, several vehicles piled up along the West Loop northbound at Evergreen Street. A nurse who witnessed the crash gave Rudolph CPR, but the 59-year-old ultimately succumbed to his injuries. Court documents indicated that Washington later admitted to driving while intoxicated. Prosecutors told the court that the accused was high on hydrocodone, with 2 toddlers in the car during the incident. KPRC-TV reported that the woman broke down in tears during court proceedings. She was ultimately convicted of felony murder and sentenced to 50 years behind bars. Number 4. Darla Renee Jackson. A California woman was charged with the first-degree murder of 39-year-old Navy Chief Petty Officer Zach Buob, who died on State Route 54 in San Diego on May the 28th of 2015. 25-year-old Darla Renee Jackson was driving a Nissan Altima on Interstate 5 at around 5:30 p.m. when she cut Buob off. In retaliation, the latter allegedly rode his motorcycle aggressively and made hand gestures at the motorist before kicking the side of her car. The defense attorney would later claim that Buob's kick left a dent and a shoe print on the vehicle. Video footage of the incident revealed that Jackson subsequently chased Buob down at high speed. The man slowed down, and the nose of Jackson's car rolled up onto the back wheel of the motorcycle. The 2 vehicles skidded together for about 315 feet before they became dislodged, at which point Buob hit the ground and got run over by Jackson. He later succumbed to his injuries at a hospital. 5 days later, Jackson was arrested and held on a $1 million bond. She initially pleaded not guilty in a court appearance during which she trembled and sobbed. In January of 2017, she pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and was given a 6-year prison sentence. In an interview at Vista County Jail, Jackson told ABC News that she deeply regretted what had happened because it turned out terribly for everyone involved. Number 3. Courtney Clenny. OnlyFans model Courtney Clenny was accused of fatally stabbing her boyfriend in their luxury Miami condo on April the 3rd of 2022. Law enforcement found the 26-year-old holding her bleeding boyfriend, 28-year-old Christian Obumseli, in her arms at their condo unit on Northeast 7th Avenue in Edgewater. Obumseli later died and Clenny was arrested on a charge of second-degree murder. The woman cried and wiped her eyes with tissues as she was denied bond. Her defense lawyers claimed that many witnesses would testify that Clenny was a victim of domestic violence and that she'd acted to save her own life. However, prosecutors argue that Obumseli was the clear victim. The woman was held in Miami-Dade jail while awaiting trial. Number 2. Jennifer Ann Mee. After being found guilty of first-degree murder on September the 20th of 2013, 22-year-old Jennifer Ann Mee was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Before her criminal exploits came to light, Mee became nationally known after making multiple television appearances for her uncontrollable hiccuping, leading to her being dubbed Hiccup Girl. In 2010, she lured a Walmart worker, 22-year-old Shannon Griffin, to an abandoned home under the pretense of buying marijuana. When Griffin arrived, 2 of Mee's accomplices robbed him at gunpoint. Griffin struggled, was shot 4 times and died in the aftermath. Mee's attorney contended that she hadn't been the one to orchestrate the robbery and there wasn't enough evidence to convict her. Prosecutors, meanwhile, argued that Mee set the deadly crime into motion using evidence such as police interviews and a taped jailhouse phone call between Mee and her mother. After deliberating for 4 hours, a Pinellas County jury found her guilty. Mee wept as the verdict was read aloud. Her co-defendants, LaRon Rayford and Lamont Newton, were also likewise convicted and sentenced to life in prison. We have one of our previous releases about when acting like a douche goes wrong, coming up after number 1, if you haven't seen that one yet. Number 1. Brittany Zamora. In March of 2018, a 6th grade teacher at Las Brisas Academy in Goodyear, Arizona, was arrested for having intimate relations with one of her students. Police reports indicated that in the late fall of 2017, 27-year-old Brittany Zamora told her students to text her if they ever got bored. One of her students began messaging her and their conversations reportedly transformed into flirting. Between February and March of 2018, Zamora had intercourse with the victim several times, both in her car and classroom. The pair's Instagram direct messages were explicit in nature. In a screenshot of their DMs, Zamora said that she'd quit her job and have intercourse with the victim all day if she could. The teen's parents found out about the conversation by way of a parental app. They confronted their son, who subsequently admitted to his relationship with Zamora. His parents called the school principal, and the teacher was swiftly arrested. In July of 2019, Zamora pleaded guilty to charges that included misconduct with a minor and public indecency. She wiped away a tear as her attorney patted her shoulder while she was sentenced to 20 years behind bars. Number 8. Anjali Ramkissoon. Anjali Ramkissoon, a 4th-year neurology resident with Jackson Health System in Miami, was fired in April of 2016 after a video had emerged of her attacking and berating an Uber driver. A few months earlier, the 30-year-old woman had entered the ride-sharing car without a reservation, at which point the driver asked her to leave. The interaction that followed was captured on cell phone video by Juan Cinco, the man who'd ordered the Uber to take him home from the Mary Brickell Village Center. Cinco told the driver to cancel their ride, but Ramkissoon became extremely belligerent upon being asked to exit the car. The driver got out instead, but the woman climbed into the front passenger seat and started throwing his belongings from the dashboard out into the street while ordering him to get back inside. The items included cash, an iPhone, pieces of paper and receipts, as well as a pair of scissors that landed just inches away from Cinco. She also hit the driver and screamed profanities at him during her outburst. As he called the police, claiming that he'd suffered bruises during Ramkissoon's onslaught, the young woman mocked his reports by saying, "I'm a 5-foot-tall girl who weighs 100 pounds. Cinco later uploaded the clip to YouTube and wrote in the post that Ramkissoon only became tearful and apologetic when the police arrived to take her away in handcuffs. The driver reportedly accepted a cash settlement in lieu of pressing charges. Ramkissoon appeared on Good Morning America following the incident and publicly apologized for her behavior on the night. Number 7. Kimberly Pancreatius. On the evening of November the 1st of 2014, a woman became furious after a couple had allegedly stolen her parking spot at a Nebraska Walmart. 36-year-old Kimberly Pancreatius pulled up alongside Julie Weekly and her husband Christopher and called them douchebags. The couple ignored her remarks and kept walking towards the store. Christopher would later tell the police that as they approached the Walmart, they heard tires screeching in the distance. Pancreatius sped towards them in her PT Cruiser, and as she turned the car, struck 40-year-old Julie in the arm with the driver's side mirror. The contact was hard enough for the mirror to break off and hang from the side of the cruiser. Julie was left in pain, but reportedly declined medical treatment. As Pancreatius fled the lot, the couple wrote down her license plate and she was later questioned by the police. The woman confessed to the parking lot rage incident, claiming that she'd only meant to scare the couple and panicked upon realizing she'd struck Julie. Pancreatius was booked at Lancaster County Jail on charges of assault and use of a deadly weapon to commit a felony. Number 6. Incident in Mullen Diner. An unnamed woman in Mullen Diner, Gold Coast, Australia, absent-mindedly walked her 2 pugs into a crime scene in 2015. In a video-recorded interaction, she became furious upon being approached by 2 officers and asked to clear the perimeter. The scene that she'd wandered into was that of 24-year-old Tara Brown's violent murder. The latter had been forced off the road by her ex-partner and former gang member, Lionel Patia, who then beat her to death. After the dog walker was stopped by the police, she started screaming at them and refused to move. She then bent down, picked up a recently collected bag of dog feces and threw it into an officer's face. Dumbfounded, the latter promptly pushed the woman to the ground, where he and a partner began restraining her. In the video, which since gained attention online, she was heard repeatedly screaming for her dogs. The woman was taken into custody, but no further information was provided on her charges. Number 5. Billy Steele. On August the 15th of 2020, British man Billy Steele was captured on cell phone footage, launching a racist tirade at a group of black passengers on London's Central Line Underground train. The 31-year-old builder worked for a company called S&S Steel Fixing Limited, owned by his wealthy parents. While swinging on the handrail, he told 3 black passengers that they were all going back, while also claiming that they were lesser than him and that they were his pets. He then reportedly started screaming out the word violence and insulted other passengers who'd intervened to the group's defense. The trio that he'd been verbally abusing was then in the process of getting off at Bank Station, and Steele stared them down as they passed him. Suddenly, one of the young men launched and landed a thunderous punch to Steele's head. He was knocked out cold and tumbled backwards to the opposite side of the car. As clips of the racist rant and knockout went viral, numerous users sided with the unnamed man who'd punched him. Steele's mother told a media outlet that he'd gone to the police, owned up to his abhorrent behavior, and didn't want the man who'd hit him to be punished. She also mentioned that he'd begun getting professional help. Number 4. Thanapatt Anakesari. In late August of 2019, Thanapatt Anakesari was invited to a school reunion in Ang Thong, central Thailand, after the 69-year-old former Navy officer and the rest of the group had sat down to enjoy food and drinks. Anakesari confronted Sutat Kusayamat. He accused the man of severely bullying him 53 years earlier when they were both in their teens. Anakesari became enraged when the second man claimed that he couldn't remember tormenting him. Anakesari demanded an apology, but Kusamayat refused, reportedly telling him to forget about it. In the moments that followed, the pensioner drew a handgun and shot the alleged bully before fleeing the scene. The latter was pronounced dead in a local hospital, while a manhunt was launched for Anakesari. The president of the 1966 class, who'd organized the event, spoke to the media in the shooting's aftermath. He revealed that Anakesari had complained about being bullied by Kusayamat in the past, but added that he'd never imagined his anger would turn into murder. The man voiced a grim conclusion to the incident by stating that Anakesari never forgot about it. Number 3. Adnan Ahmed. Self-described pickup artist Adnan Ahmed was convicted of threatening and abusive behavior towards women in October of 2019. The man, then in his late 30s, called himself Addy A-Game and secretly filmed himself approaching women in Glasgow and Lanarkshire, Scotland. He then used the footage to offer tips on how to overcome last-minute resistance to advances. Ahmed also included audio in the clips that was reportedly recorded during intercourse. The 5 women who'd given evidence at his trial, aged in their late teens and early 20s, claimed to have felt intimidated by him. After a jury found the so-called pickup artist guilty, he was sentenced to 2 years in jail in order to register as an offender for 10 years. In spite of the victim's testimonies, his conviction was eventually quashed on appeal less than a year later. His lawyers successfully argued that Sheriff Lindsay Wood had carried out an inappropriate cross-examination of Ahmed that had made it impossible for the jury to have an impartial opinion. Number 2. Lauren Elizabeth Cartshaw. In the early morning hours of August the 4th of 2018, Lauren Elizabeth Cartshaw drove through a stop sign in South Carolina at 60 miles per hour. An officer then pulled over her white Ford Fusion in the town of Bluffton. While talking to the police, Cartshaw was slurring her words and the blood alcohol test registered her at nearly twice the legal limit. The woman apologized for speeding and running the stop sign, explaining that she'd been heading to her boyfriend's home. She admitted to have had a few glasses of wine at a nearby restaurant while celebrating her 33rd birthday. Marijuana and rolling papers were found in her car, and the woman said that she may have smoked earlier in the night. Cartshaw was taken into custody for driving while intoxicated, and the ensuing interaction with the arresting officers was captured on dashcam audio. From the back of the squad car, the woman began listing the reasons why she shouldn't be arrested, which included that she was a pretty girl, implying she'd be at risk in jail. Cartshaw went on to say that she'd graduated with honors from a high-accredited university and had been an all-American cheerleader. Her most troubling statement was, according to a police report, uttered off-camera when she told an officer that she was a very clean, thoroughbred white girl. When the officer, who was also white, asked what that had to do with anything, Cartshaw told him that he should know what it meant because he was a cop. The woman, who worked as a real estate agent, added that her partner was a cop and suggested she didn't fit the type of people most commonly encountered in that line of work. She was charged with driving under the influence, speeding, disregarding a stop sign, simple possession of marijuana, and possession of drug paraphernalia. Cartshaw, whose statements had sparked online outrage, eventually pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor DUI count.
See, I graduated from a really good university. Please, I've never been arrested. I've never been in jail. Please, I don't want to know what it's like. I don't want to know what it's like. I'm a pretty girl. Please, I'm almost a valedictorian.
Number 1. Karen Bettis Hallman. A clip of a Penn State University associate professor smoking on an American Airlines flight while ranting about the US's global military domination became viral in 2015. Shortly after the plane coming in from Nicaragua landed at Miami International Airport, Karen Bettis Hallman lit up a cigarette. Earlier in the flight, she'd repeatedly shouted out, "The United States has declared war on Venezuela," and went on a loud rant. Other passengers captured the academic on cell phone video as she spoke about the Obama administration's supposed plans to take over the South American country's enormous oil reserves as it was going through economic turmoil. The 52-year-old also maintained that the US had given cancer to her hero, Hugo Chavez, after flight crew informed her that she'd be taken into custody by the authorities in Florida for her disruptive behavior. Hallman replied that she was aware, but still determined to say her piece. She lit up a cigarette and tried to blame it on another passenger when confronted by flight crew before eventually being escorted off the aircraft and arrested for disorderly conduct. In the incident's aftermath, Hallman spoke to a Philadelphia media outlet and defended her actions as a protest against US imperialism. She referenced sanctions recently imposed by then-President Obama on Venezuelan officials as evidence of the nefarious agenda. When asked about the smoking, the professor described it as a symbol that the United States is a smoking gun, and identifying with the revolutionary causes all revolutionaries such as Fidel Castro or Daniel Ortega smoked. She also claimed to have been tortured by the FBI following her arrest by being put in an extremely cold room for hours and not allowed to use the bathroom. Updates from her case indicated that she was still employed by Penn State, but not teaching in the classroom. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be generally happy but cry uncontrollably for multiple hours every day, or never cry again for the rest of your life? Let us know in the comments section below.